I'm coming to get down. I'm coming.
Hello, everyone,
Coming to dance.
and welcome to this week's edition of Chat Night Africa.
Dance. Gonna get down. Gonna get down. Gonna party. Party. Gonna boogie. Boogie. And when we jam,
This is Chat Night Africa from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. On Chat Night Africa this week,
I'm ready.
you and the law.
Attention,
I'm coming back.
Transmission Director,
Coming.
Mombali
Coming to get down.
Ingwa.
We're gonna get down.
Production
We're gonna dance.
Advisors, Professor Ben Bongang and Dr. B. Tadzong Famunda. This is Chat Night Africa from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Social media platforms, manager and video editor, Sir Roger Full.
We're gonna dance.
Studio manager,
We're gonna party.
Beatrice Famunen. This is Chat Night. Also on Chat Night Africa Live from Nigeria, Jerry Johnny, our Chief Africa correspondent with the package Africa This Week in the News. Production advisors, assistants, Emmanuel Wayindi, John Tanto, and Uncle Lot Benson at Frontier Street Bamenda. Special assistant to the presenter of Chat Night Africa, Daniela Eno. Ladies and gentlemen, you and the law at Chat Night Africa this week. Your presenter is Divine Chamukong.
Get down. Get down. We party hard.
This is Chat Night Africa Live. In a moment, you will see the learned lawyer on the platform. Lawyer
It's all right here. It's dynamite.
Ananeba Akufo. Ladies and gentlemen, join me now in welcoming attorney, high-powered attorney, Ananeba Akufo.
We're gonna get down. We're gonna dance.
This is
We're gonna dance.
Ananeba Akufo. You and the law.
Get down. We're gonna dance. We're gonna dance. I'm ready. I'm coming. I'm coming to dance.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of You and the Law. You and the Law at Chat Night Africa. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse in a court of law, regardless of where you are. Now, before you dismiss this with, well, Divine, I'm a law-abiding person, let me tell you this. Those who find themselves before a judge in a court of law are not there because they intentionally walked themselves into trouble. That's why you should pay attention to this broadcast, whether you live in the United States or not. Guaranteed, by the time 90 minutes end, you will think and talk like a lawyer. Let me just give you some hints. You got some property before you got married. When you got married, you acquired more property. Maybe the woman too had some money in a bank account. What happens if, unfortunately, a divorce sets in? We will answer or raise a lot of thorny questions that are related to kitchen table issues. Again, pay attention. Ladies and gentlemen, join me one more time in welcoming Attorney Ananeba Akufo. Thank you, lawyer Aneneba Akufo, for accepting to come on the platform this week for Chat Night Africa and to take questions on the law. Who is Attorney Aneneba Akufo in the first place?
Once more, thank you, Mr. Divine Chamukong, and thanks for all you've done for the community. And again, thanks for all the listeners of Chat Night Africa. Again, I'm not new to this show on this platform. Again, this is like a repeat broadcast, maybe on a different wavelength today. And again, once again, my name is Aneneba Akufo. I'm a licensed New York practicing attorney. I live down here in Georgia, specifically in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And my principal practice here in Georgia is immigration law. And again, I can delve in other aspects of the law. Whichever question you want to ask us today, we should be ready to answer. But again, I have to give you this, this exclusion or this waiver, whatever we say tonight about the law, it's, it does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and myself or you and Chat Night Africa. So this is just a show. It doesn't mean we're not telling the truth, but you cannot hold us liable or hold Chat Night Africa liable for information that we divulge tonight about the law. So this is just it's just a show to educate people on their rights and their responsibilities as far as society is concerned. So I'll be happy to take any questions that come in today.
And when we are ready to take your questions, we will announce that. The number will be 240-603-7367. The first question, lawyer Aneneba Akufo, I have to ask you, has to do with the news. There are 9 Supreme Court justices in the United States Supreme Court. Each time there is a vacancy, replacing the justice becomes a dog-eat-dog fight between Republicans and Democrats. Usually we hear of liberal justices and conservative justices. Why is replacing a justice at the Supreme Court of the United States such a brassy, such a belligerent exercise between Republicans and Democrats? That's part A of my question. Part B of my question is, how does a liberal judge roll differently from a conservative judge? Aren't they using the same Constitution of the United States?
Yes, excuse me. Once again, Mr. Divine Chamuko. Sorry.
I'd like you to take the question. I'd like you to take the answer, repeat the answer, sir. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So what I was saying, or what I just said is the Constitution of the United States creates 3 branches of government. You have the legislature, you have the executive, and you have the judiciary. And of course, the Supreme Court is the only functional organ that's created by the Constitution. Every other court is being created by Congress. So the Constitution creates just one court, and that's the Supreme Court of the United States. Why it is very contentious getting a judge on the bench to be one of the associate justices of the Supreme Court, a very thorny issue, is just because society has evolved so much from the time the Constitution was created. So when the Constitution was written and adopted, society was absolutely different then. Take, for example, the First Amendment that grants you freedom of speech, freedom of religion practice, establishment clauses of the Constitution. Those things, there are certain things like the internet. The internet did not exist then. Gay marriages did not exist then. Even if it existed, it wasn't that prominent. So these are things that get evolved the way as society evolves. So if you're talking about conservative judges and liberal judges, or why this issue is very thorny when it gets to replacing and one of the associate justices on the Supreme Court, people fight so much to get their own side of, the equation looked into before, approving somebody to sit on the, the Supreme Court is because there are two ways of looking at it. You have who interpret the Constitution, they're called originalists, and you have people who interpret the Constitution who are called interpretationists. So the originalists look at the Constitution the way it was written. And the way the Constitution was written, if you and I look back at the textual context of that Constitution, if you look at the jurisprudence at that time, you will realize that you and I who were black in color, or those who were brought to the United States involuntarily, they were not counted as a full person. So such people would not be allowed to vote, for example, or a woman. They will not have the same rights and responsibilities as a white person in the United States. So those people who try to construct society, the way society is evolving, looking back at the Constitution, the way it was written then, those are the originalists. And by implication, they call conservatives because they want to conserve what the society was at that moment. Then if you look at the other side, the liberal judges that you're talking about, they interpret the Constitution following the evolution of society, because society is not dormant. Just as I just told you, if at some point the internet was created, that's another form of communication. That's something it was non-existent at the time when they were writing the Constitution, when the founders were writing the Constitution. Because if Hamilton, writing the Constitution, sitting there with those luminaries, had known about the fact that the internet would one day become a functional organ of society, a very prominent aspect of the way we communicate, or a situation where at some point, if you look at the case of the Citizens United, where they decided to say, where the Supreme Court said a corporation, for example, can participate in a political process because a corporation is a person. A corporation can sue and get sued and can be liable for committing a tort. So these are things that were not envisaged at the time that the Constitution was constructed back in the days, more than 200 years ago. But that the Constitution has withstood time, it's something that we have to give credence to the founding fathers and those who wrote the Constitution. But again, the originalists are those you call conservatives, and those people who evolve with society, they look at the Constitution following the evolution of society. Those are the interpretationists. And if you look at, there is a case that I would like to mention here. It's Brown v. Board of Education. It's back in 1956, in which, before then, society was absolutely so segregated. Blacks could not sit at the same lunch counters with white people and attend the same schools. So this particular landmark case itself desegregated the schools, although, at some point it was, they were saying it has to be, we might be, equal, but we're not the same, or things like that. But again, that's a landmark case, which it is what's called a super precedent, because it's something that you cannot just touch because society has gone way past that particular point. Or there is another case, Obergefell v. Hodges, which legalized same-sex marriages. That's something that the founding fathers did not really think about, that marriage can be something beyond a man and a woman. So, but today it is different. And that's why you see the current judge, to be Justice Amy, had actually, she doesn't think, because of her religious philosophy, her religious foundation, she thinks that marriage should be between a man and a woman. So that's the fear. Those people who've gotten these rights already, like gay people, who've gotten married to their spouses, they're living a happy life, they can adopt. They're afraid right now, because if she becomes the sixth conservative voice in the Supreme Court, then there is a possibility that Obergefell can be overturned again, because it is not a super precedent. Because just about 2 or 3 months ago, Justice Thomas was actually writing, like trying to chip away the rights, the rights and the freedoms that particular law gave to LGBTQ community people. So that's why if a seat is open in the Supreme Court, If you look at it, like the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who just passed, may her soul rest in peace, about I think that's about 2 or 3 weeks ago. She was really tired. She was sick. She was not a very strong woman the way she was, but she resisted resigning from the Supreme Court because, again, the Supreme Court, it's a life appointment. You cannot be replaced. So she actually wanted to stay on the court till they get a new president. Hopefully, it would have been, a Democrat, so that she can resign and a Democrat can replace her on the Supreme Court, because it would tilt the court towards the right, towards the conservative bench of the Supreme Court. And that's something that, most people would think that society has evolved. The jurisprudence now, it's leaning towards evolution, and rather than keeping things the way they were back in the 1800s, when mail was being carried by carriage horses from one city to the other, and Black people were, shoved behind the back as, a third of a person, things like that. So that's why there is so much contention when an open seat is available in the Supreme Court.
This is Chat Night Africa, and my guest on the show, christened You and the Law, is Attorney Anineba Akufo. This is a question somebody just texted me. If you have a born-again Christian who becomes a justice at the U.S. Supreme Court, should Christian evangelicals be gyrating, jumping for joy? And I ask this question because at the Supreme Court, what they document there is the law, the Constitution, and not the Bible. So how likely is somebody's faith going to determine how he or she rules on cases at the Supreme Court, sir?
Well, again, it is not supposed to. Just as you rightly said, the law is the law. You interpret the law the way the Constitution wrote it. You cannot delve away from that Constitution because of your personal beliefs. For example, wherever you're coming from, whether you are a conservative, because inside the Christian faith itself, you have very conservative Christians, and you have Christians who are liberals, and you have Christians who are in the middle. They construe religious dogma differently, praying to the same God. So inside that particular milieu, you have people who look at it the way the Bible is supposed to be. Marriage, for example, it has to be between a man and a woman. A man and a man is a sin, and that's what the Bible says still today. Although the current Pope just decided to talk about getting civil union laws for gay people, but he did not fundamentally change the doctrine itself to say that marriage is acceptable within the Christian context between a man and a woman. It is still a sin if a man and a man, or a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, I beg your pardon, get married. So normally your religious conviction should not be something that you should bring to the court. You're not supposed to be an activist justice. For the current judge, Judge Amy, if you listen to her speak, she is very bright. She is very knowledgeable. She is very, very intelligent in the law. But the fear is most people are afraid because of her writings. She was a professor as of now, or she is still a professor until she resigns. From her writings and her teachings, it is what people draw from what what has formed, her core ideas about interpreting the law. Because it's just like, put it this way, if you're a very rich person and you're a miser, or if you're a poor person, you are so open-handed the way you give out your money and things like that, you would always want to interpret the law to give you a little bit of favoritism. Because there is this one thing they always say, you can twist the scales of justice and they will always balance. So it doesn't matter which way you twist it to the right you twist it to the left, the scales will always balance. It may not balance to your favor, but it does balance to the favor of somebody else. So if your conviction, because they always ask them these questions, would your religious belief, be, affect your judicial principles when you rule on cases that come before you? And of course, they will always answer to the negative. But how do you look at somebody? You look at somebody from the past. You look at what they've done, how they've spoken, given speeches, on podiums. What do they say? What have they espoused? If you take somebody like the Senator Bernie Sanders, the former presidential candidate. I mean, he's a socialist. He tells you he is. So if you take somebody like that to be the next president of the United States, what do you expect of him? That's what he would do. And that's the fear, that people would use their personal beliefs, their personal convictions to help them tilt the court towards the way they reason, because that's how they've been formed all through life. Their religious conviction is what has formed her. The law is what has formed her also. But whether you can separate these two you can separate these two and still retain the power to do the right thing, that's where we are all afraid. But note that I listened to the current Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, when he was being confirmed. He was a strict originalist. But again, you see, he has ruled differently. He has ruled in favor of the liberals on some issues that he thinks that society has moved to a point where we cannot go back again to the original text of the Constitution and construe it at that point the way it's supposed to be. So you have to, again, some of these people at some point, they would get on the court with their original ideas, with their intents, but they would interpret the law following what society is in here.
Lawyer Aneneba Akufo. My learned lawyer, not too long ago, about 126 African immigrants were deported to Africa from the United States. The question many people are asking is, do undocumented or illegal immigrants in the United States enjoy any legal protections? That's part A of my question. Part B is, what's the difference between illegal immigrant and an undocumented immigrant, sir?
Yeah, I think we had delved on this issue a little bit in the past about being illegal and being unlawfully present in the United States. But again, we still look at what happened to our fellow African brethren when they were deported from the United States. It was appalling for me to see, because my duty here in the United States is trying to get these people situated in the United States, those who can present a very good case. But for these guys, for these people to be sent back where they were coming from, it was a sad day for me and for most attorneys that aspire to represent people, to make their lives better. So I think that was 81 Cameroonians, you have Congolese, you have Nigerian, you have other people from other African countries were on that very flight going back to motherland. From what I heard, I wasn't privy to any of these cases, is that some had actually exhausted all their legal resources here in the United States, that some had not even seen a judge. That's that's something that people have to look into. But it was sad, to see them leave, because the bad thing is, the 1951 convention, Refugee Convention, which the United States has signed, it's a signatory, and, has ratified that particular convention. It says that there is undiscriminated, you cannot discriminate against anybody who is seeking asylum protection in your country. You cannot subject that person to torture, and you cannot repatriate that person. It's called refoulement. You cannot send that person back to where he or she is coming from, because technically, logically, they would be persecuted, because if you're fleeing from torture and you're sent back and the government that you were fleeing from is still in place, what do you expect? They will take you, and I mean, they might, run all type of stuff, gamut online and say we will treat them with fair hands and all that stuff, but it would never end like that. We know they would torture those people. They will try to extract confessions from them, and some might even end up getting jail sentences, and some might even end up being killed, or directly or indirectly. So it was a travesty of justice, as long as I'm concerned, because it is not that the United States should not have applied their laws. They did what every civilized nation should do. But my point of contention is because the convention says you should not send them back where they're coming from. You look for a third country that will accept them. But if you summarily send these people to the same place where they're fleeing from persecution, then you violated international norms. And of course, this is a champion of democracy that we know in the world. And of course, the other aspect of your question, which was being undocumented and being illegal in the United States. Being illegal just means you are illegal. You have no rights, no responsibility, no reason to be in the United States. That's it. You don't have any documentation to be in the United States. You walk across the border. You don't have a visa. You were not given permission to come to the United States. You don't ask for asylum protection at the border. You just sneak through the border. You are undocumented in the United States and you're illegal. But the other aspect is you might be unlawful present also in the United States, which means you might actually have come to the United States and overstayed your visa. Let's say you went to your home consulate, embassy, and you applied for a visa. It was granted. You come to the border, you're granted permission to enter the United States for 6 months. The next 4 or 5 years, you're here, you have your children, and you're living your life well. Now you are unlawfully present in the United States. You're not a legal, alien in the United States. You're unlawfully present because at some point you were lawful, but now you become unlawful. So, and if immigration, the ICE, accosts you, then you would be sent back to where you came from.
This is Chat Night, Africa. You said fleeing from war, and I like to use the statement as a bridge to my next question. The question is, when people flee from another country to take, for instance, and in this case, the United States, their case files in court are with reasons like, well, they are being persecuted in their countries of birth or origin. Now, is fleeing from economic hardship, domestic violence, cultural violence, war, persecution, political persecution, are these persuasive arguments in a court, in an immigration court in the United States? And if yes, why do so many of them lose those cases?
So there are 5 grounds for you to seek protection if you're fleeing from your country. There is nothing as an economic refugee. I don't think so. If there is a natural disaster which you cannot solve in your country, where you can no longer live because of that natural disaster, you become a refugee, you can be protected because of that. But if you're fleeing because you graduated from university or from high school for the past 5 years, you've not been employed, you don't have a job, that's that's for just economic reasons. You cannot seek political asylum for that. Or if you're fleeing from domestic violence, it just depends what type of violence you're going through. We have certain cultural traits that subject people to certain type of violence. Let's take things like genital mutilation in some cultures back in Africa. I don't know whether they practice this in Asia, but I know back in Africa, some cultures still practice that. I mean, that's violence you're meting on a woman. Those are things that are protected. If you can flee from a relationship because that's what you've been subjected to, then you can seek asylum in the United States or any other friendly country that wishes to grant you protection. But simple things like domestic violence, it used to be like that. It used to be like that in most countries in South America where there is still gang violence, and a woman is treated as a slave. You don't have no right. You have absolutely no rights within that marital relationship. You do and say what your husband, tells you to. Some of those women, they they left their country, like El Salvador, Guatemala, most Latin American countries. They crossed the borders, came to the United States, and they were granted political asylum. Again, as I had said to you before, um, that particular aspect about domestic violence, it's been recanted. Not really, you know, the previous Attorney General Jeff Sessions had actually gone back again and rewound some of those cases, and that's not the ground for asylum. So protection in an immigration court or before an asylum officer, it has to be one, your political opinion. You're fleeing from persecution because of your political opinion. Two, because of your race. Three, because of your religion. Four, because of your sexual orientation. And there is one catch-up group. It is called you belong to a particular social group. So if you look at the case about the instance of genital mutilation, for example, it is not your race, it is not your religion, it is not your political opinion. It is because you belong to a particular social group where you don't have protection. Society thinks that they have an upper hand on how you are supposed to operate. That one is the catch-all, and that's where most of the cases can fit into. Now, why these cases fail in immigration court, I don't know. Why specifically this, our brethren that were sent back home. But from what I know, some of these cases, it's just lack of evidence. It is lack of preparation, and some don't have attorneys to help them prepare these cases. And the one thing I've always decried, I always advise my people or people coming from Africa, we are blessed. Most of us, we speak English, we read and write, we understand the language so well. But again, don't take that as a plus and feel that you can, we go through the legal process and procedures and get your case done before an immigration judge. No, please always have your family try to get an attorney, assist you, prepare these documents to submit them to the judges. Because I've seen cases where, because in detention, they have a very wide library where they tell them, this is the law, this is, you read it, you can understand it, and they decide to write motions that they don't even understand what a motion is, and whether this motion, whether you're supposed to do it at that moment, or you're supposed to do it at a certain time within the life of the case. That's something that an attorney is supposed to weave through. But these people, because number one, they might be poor, and some are really poor. Don't get me wrong. They are really, because they're fleeing, some, they just had nothing coming to the United States. So it's very difficult for them to put these cases together. So, like with the Latin American community, they have lots of resources here in the United States. They have organizations that help them, prepare some of these documents for them and papers for them, to help weave through the legal process. But what our people don't have are some of these resources. And when you see people, they're trying to champion some of these causes here in the United States that I've seen, they end up not really doing the right thing. It's like a show. They just want to, present themselves as if they're doing something, whether it's trying to gain a little bit of favor from the community, but they end up instead worsening these cases. Because if you look at a cross-section of those people who were deported from the United States, I bet you there must have been a community, a Cameroonian community here that was protecting, trying to help them go through attorneys. But again, that's where we find ourselves. And it's just unfortunate that some of these cases, there is lack of evidence and there's just lack of real preparation to get them through the legal process.
You are watching Chat Night Africa, and today, you and the law. Lawyer Anenebe Akufo, are there times when even people become U.S. citizens, that is, naturalized U.S. citizens or holders of the green card, or after they've been granted asylum, are there times that this status could be revoked? And if yes, why? In what circumstances? Would you lose your green card or lose your U.S. citizenship?
Yeah, getting, losing your green card is just as ABC. It's very easy. It's a temporal stay. It's a temporal, protection here in the United States. But if you commit a crime, if you commit a felony, they will send you out. They would just put you into deportation proceedings and send you out of the United States. So it's not a guarantee that because you are a U.S. citizen, I mean you are a U.S. A permanent resident, you can just do things, in any manner in which you will. No, you have to respect the laws. If you commit some egregious acts, let's say a felony, if you're convicted and sentenced, and that's it. If it's 1 year and above, once you serve your 1 year sentence, they'll release you to ICE and they will begin legal proceedings against you, removal proceedings against you. And it's always very difficult when it gets to that point, depending on the type of crime. Let's say like sexual violence or possession. That's something you don't even want to get to. Possession of drugs or being convicted of, for a drug offense. It's very, very egregious because there is no waiver. Let's say if you're caught with more than 30 grams of marijuana and you're convicted, it's a possession charge. And once you get to before the immigration judge, there is just no waiver for you. You have to leave the country. So being a green card holder and you commit some of these offenses does not give you a leeway to stay in the United States. You will be placed into proceedings and eventually you would be removed from the United States. But being a citizen, the preponderance of evidence is higher. The government has to actually have a higher burden of really getting you out of the United States. So the burden is higher if you are a U.S. citizen than when you're a green card holder.
This is Chat Night Africa. Already I'm having indications that our Chat Night Africa chief correspondent in Nigeria is live on the line now. Before we continue, here is Jerry Johnny. Soon he will be reporting what we call Africa This Week in the News. Hello, Jerry Johnny, your report.
At least 18 people were killed and several others injured when a 6-story church building collapsed in eastern Ghana, a local official has said. While rescue teams rescued 8 people, 18 bodies were pulled out of the rubble of the building located in the Asene Manso district on Thursday, said Richard Amo Yate, a director of the National Disaster Management Organization. Fearing the number of casualties may rise, he said search and rescue efforts are still ongoing and the injured have been taken to different hospitals. Yate, however, did not provide any detail on what caused the collapse. Local media reported that more than 60 people were present at the site when the accident happened. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, Thursday night in a national TV address, spoke about the unrest that has gripped his country in recent days. Buhari, in his speech, however, and notably did not mention the shootings of peaceful protesters on Tuesday night in Lagos, the commercial nerve center of the West African state that prompted international outrage. Former Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta returned to Bamako on Thursday after more than a month in the United Arab Emirates, where he was receiving medical attention. The West African country he ruled until mid-August had new leaders. Keïta was deposed by the military after weeks of civilian protests against his rule. The junta ruled briefly before appointing former Defense Minister Bandao transitional president under pressure from regional bloc ECOWAS. Keïta supporters said the 75-year-old looked to be in a much better shape. But even with a new president, Mali's problems remain the same. The country is still beset by military insurgency and an economy in crisis, just as under Keïta, who retained significant influence. It is not clear if the former president will try to pursue an active role in Mali's politics. And finally, tonight in Africa This Week in News, we talk news in Uganda, where armed police on Wednesday besieged the campaign headquarters of Bobby Wine, a pop star and politician who is seeking Uganda's presidency in elections set for 2021, an opposition figure said. Police confiscated items such as security cameras and supplies of red berets that are symbols of Wine's popular campaign. David Lewis, an official with Wine's party who is at the scene in the Ugandan capital Kampala, told newsmen. Wine, a legislator whose real name is Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, was meeting with other leaders of his National Unity Platform party, where the police swooped in and cordoned off the area, he said. Wine and other party officials have not been arrested. But in a Twitter post, Wine reposted that comrades have been injured after police raided his headquarters and seized documents and other items. The police spokesman did not immediately respond to questions, but authorities frequently accuse Wine and others in the opposition of disobeying orders aimed at protecting public peace. Wine, who has been arrested many times in recent years, has captured the imagination of many Ugandans with his persistent calls for President Yoweri Museveni to retire. My name is Jerry Johnny, reporting for Chat Night Africa Live.
Thank you, Jerry Johnny. That's our chief Africa correspondent live in Nigeria reporting for Chat Night Africa, Jerry Johnny. Now, you picked up two things in the report which kind of relates to what we've just been talking about. The chief opposition leader in Uganda, and who's being chased around like a rabbit. And you also know or heard about the events in Nigeria where there have been several deaths following protests against police use of deadly force. So if somebody from that crowd in Nigeria or the organizer of the protest, nationwide protest, ran to the United States, would that person qualify for political asylum, sir?
Not necessarily.
Why not?
And again, it would depend. Let me put it that way. It would just depend. You know, torture has to be something. It's not something that just happened once, then you qualify for protection in a foreign country. It has to be something that's systematic. It has to be prolonged. It has to be something that has been happening for a long time. Bobby Wine in Uganda, which the African correspondent just mentioned, that's somebody who's been subjected to a lot of torture in Uganda by Yoweri Museveni. So if that gentleman, after one of his prison stints, he is unable to relocate in somewhere in Uganda and finds himself in the United States or in any other friendly democracy in the Western world, that person, he would qualify for political asylum. But for the NSAS in Nigeria, where that was a one day of violence and it was quieted down, if you flee after that one day, if you were not directly involved, but just the fact that you were around the vicinity where these things happen, you cannot rush to the United States or to Europe or any other country and say you're seeking political asylum because you were being persecuted because you march on the streets. Well, it has to be, it's something that's subjective. It has to be you. It's just not because you belong to a crowd, then that automatically grants you the right to be accorded protection in a foreign country based on the asylum and refugee laws. No, that's not it. So it has to be something that's been persistent. It's been going on for a while. You cannot flee without being noticed. Let's say if, like Bobby Wine, for example, I just use that example because that's a very good case right there. If that guy, after the many times he's been in detention, you know, he can no longer take it. He moves from Kampala to another part of Uganda and they still chase him and detain him. And he's been tortured. He moved to another place. He cannot. And the government is still after him. If he flees and present that case before a reasonable judge, which most of them are, they would grant him protection because the government is after him. That is a clear-cut case there. But as a protest which is you're exercising a fundamental right to freedom, to assemble and hold your government accountable. If you're being persecuted for that, if you're organizing a protest march, yes, you stand single. You stand out there as somebody who can be accorded protection because you are very visible before the government. It is not everybody in the crowd. It is you. You stand out there on the podium, you hold a microphone, you're broadcasting, or you are a secretary of a movement in your country, you're distributing leaflets, you're organizing meetings. Okay, the government knows you, they know your name. You you're somebody that can easily be seen. So if that's where you find yourself, yes, but it's not just everybody who get themselves involved in political manifestations that gives them the right to protection in a foreign country, because that's not how the laws were written.
During all these uprisings, political unrest in Africa, governments usually use military force against civilians, sometimes armed civilians, sometimes unarmed civilians. And then we hear those who are protesting crying out loud, screaming genocide, genocide, genocide. What qualifies in an immigration court as a genocide? How is it defined?
Well, I mean, genocide generally is, you're trying to eliminate some person or persons because of their tribal lineages. I mean, that's basically what genocide is. United Nations, they classify genocide following different categories. They have different indices that they follow. If you're trying to exterminate a tribe or a particular group of people because of what they are, or because you want to subject them to that type of brutal, inhumane treatment, if you kill a certain number, if it goes to a particular threshold, that would arise to a genocide. But again, if you find yourself in that situation where your tribe or your tribe is being exterminated by another tribe or by the government, they just want to wipe you off the face of your country's map. Yes, that's a case where you can actually flee. And yes, they're persecuting you at that moment. Remember, I told you there are 5 different instances where you can seek protection. It is your race. Now they're looking at you, although you come from the same, your racial makeup, but traditionally you might be different from them. Like the Hutus and the Tutsis back in Rwanda, they're different people. They're all black. They all belong to one particular enclave. But you realize that it was just one way that this killing was going on, just killing one particular tribe. It wasn't the reverse. So in such a situation, you call that a genocide. And if you find yourself in one of those milieux, then you can seek protection outside your country.
If you look around Africa, so many countries are mired in political turbulence. As a result, you have people who flee the country and become activists, say in the United States or Europe. The question I just got by text moments ago is, if you're fled from such political turbulence and you are either in the United States or Europe, in other words, outside of the country where you fled from, if you start organizing an armed insurgency against that country, are the laws of the United States, are your activities covered by the laws of the United States, sir?
Well, it just depends what you term an armed insurgency. Like the U.S. Constitution, there is freedom of speech. The First Amendment grants you, which is part of the Bill of Rights, it grants you freedom of speech. Like burning the flag. Burning the flag is part of speech. But there is something called fighting words. Fighting words, if you use those words to instigate violence, then that is no longer freedom. That is not a right for you to speak, because you're using speech now for a different purpose. If you're exercising your right to speak, we heard, okay, that is correct. But if you're saying people who flee from their countries, they're in the United States, they're activists, they're using their platforms or they're using their voices because they enjoy a lot of freedom in the United States to spur violence somewhere else. That is not correct. That's something that can be, if it is proven that if there is a direct link between what you said and the violence being meted where you directed to, then you might be in violation of the laws of the United States, because those are words that you're using to instigate violence for people to be killed. It is something, yes, that is true, but the burden again is on the person trying to bring the case, because it's a very high bar. It's a very high bar for you to actually jump over in order to get your case before a judge or to win before a court.
You and the law at Chat Night Africa, and my guest this week is Attorney Aneneba Akufo. Lawyer Kufo, we shift gears from immigration issues, the law and immigrants to tort. Let's say you acquired property before getting married. And usually before getting married, people have property, they have bank accounts. Maybe the woman has a bank account with a lot of money in it, or the man has property, real estate, or also bank accounts with a lot of money. Now, when they get married, some of the property could be acquired in the course of the marriage. Unfortunately, what we do not always wish, fortunately, it doesn't always happen, is divorce. Divorce sets in. So, who gets what? You are an attorney. You said you had the houses all over the place. Before you got married, and you did not sign any prenuptial agreements. When there's a divorce, who gets what?
Again, it's a very interesting question, and it's something that we all go through in our daily lives, or if not personally or practically, you see other people go through it every day. What I would always advise for people before they get married is to sign a prenuptial agreement, which is it's you try to segregate certain aspects of your life in writing. You put it down in a legal document that you can always refer to, and you can always go back again and amend that prenuptial agreement, no matter the way you write it, because it's a contract. Marriage itself, it's a contract. It's a contract between a man and a woman. It is not like it comes with rights and responsibilities. We don't just take it the way people just assume marriage is. No, it is a contract between a man and a woman that decide, okay, let's go into this union. We might end up procreating. What would happen to these children when we have these children? If we have a house, what would happen to the house? If we have a home together, what would happen if there is a divorce? Or if I give you a ring right now, like an engagement ring, if you deny that you don't want to marry me, should I take back the ring, or is that a gift in anticipation of marriage that has to be returned in case you decide not to get married to me? So these are basic things that we just don't rush into these relationships. I mean, I know in the heat of the moment where you're so much in love, you just don't see some of these things again. But these are things that as society evolves, as we evolve in our ways of thinking and doing things, this is what's expected of everybody. Do a prenuptial agreement before you get into a relationship. Although, of course, that particular agreement will never define everything. It will never solve every challenge that comes in a marital relationship. So in terms of, because if you had a prenup agreement, most of the things that would, be get you into trouble when divorce sets in, or there is trouble in that particular relationship, would have been defined in that prenuptial agreement. If you look at property, for example, which you mentioned, the way we look at it is when you're coming into a relationship, there are people who come in, they already have their property, separate property. Let's say you own your stock, an IBM stock. I own a stock for Apple. That's something I have before I came into that particular relationship. Let's say before my dad passed away, bequeathed property to me. That's my personal property. Before your dad passed away, or there is something that a will by probate, it was given to you by will. That stays your property. That's individual. That's separate property. But once the two of you come into that relationship, everything that is acquired during that relationship, it is joint property. So in case there is a divorce, we look at separate property that was acquired before marriage and property that was acquired during marriage, and try to segregate those two and decide what goes to who and what belongs to which other party. But of course, again, it will always draw you also to see what type of marriage are you in, because there are certain jurisdictions here in the United States where we have what is called common law marriages, which you don't really need a marriage certificate. All you need to do is you live as a couple husband and wife, you might have children, you may not have, but you hold each other out as a spouse to the other party. Now you will be regarded as in the community as married. You might have joint bank accounts, you might have joint insurances, you might have a joint medical insurance and all those things together, just the way husband and wife project themselves. And you might even mention to people that, okay, this is my wife or this is my husband, things like that. You really don't need a marriage certificate, but it is not in every jurisdiction in the United States. You must be within that one.
If you got married when you had your skyscrapers or your big bank accounts, why should you need a prenup when obviously the date is there stating when you were married?
No, again, no. I mean,
and when the date when you were married and when you got the property.
No, prenuptial is just, it's basically for the future. It's not really for the past, because like what you just mentioned, you have a skyscraper somewhere, or you have a piece of real estate somewhere. No, that's separate property. Even if tomorrow there is a divorce, no, that's not communal property. That is separate. It will always be treated with or without a prenup. Prenup is always for the future. What would happen if something happens in that relationship? It's an agreement that you go into. It is not really looking backward, it is looking forward. Prenuptial agreements.
Part B of my question, sir, you get married to a woman, or a woman gets married to a man. The woman is not working. The man builds a house during the marriage, when the marriage actually is going on. And there is a divorce. The man says, well, I built this, you were not working. Would that be a valid argument, so in court?
Well, it's a valid argument from your perspective, but whether it holds true in court, it just matters, because, again, there is something called consortium in a relationship. So you benefit from each other, which is something that if you were not married, you would not have those benefits. Those are just things that come as a result of that relationship. So the fact that you were not working, you were doing other chores at home, you were doing other stuff at home that help that particular person to be able to acquire that wealth, to build that house. So you cannot tomorrow come back and say, okay, no, I was the only one working. I was the only one with a paycheck. You were sitting at home, just eating and just cleaning the house and doing stuff at home, doing chores, and you did not help me. No, that person indirectly or directly assisted you. You are party. You are in unity. So you cannot come back tomorrow and try to say, no, this property, I use my money to acquire it. It is joint property. You acquired it during marriage. Just as if the woman goes outside, let's say, and has an affair and has a child, the presumption under the law is a child born during marriage is a child of that marriage until the contrary is proven.
What is the contrary? A DNA?
Well, a DNA, or if the husband decides to say, okay, this is not my husband, this is not my child, and they go through a DNA, as you said, or I decide not to accept this child but again, it is the premise. The law says a child born into a relationship, into a union between a man and a woman, it's a child of that marriage. Whether you like it or not, that's how the law looks at it.
Still talking about children and marriage, and at this point, you can dial the number 240-603-7367. Repeat, 240-603-7367. If you're overseas, you can do a WhatsApp call, 001-240-603-7367. Now, there are children in the marriage. Unfortunately, and I keep saying unfortunately, there's a divorce. Who stays with the child and why?
The law will look at it from, the first thing is they look at the best interest of the child. That's the common standard that's always applied in every law court. The best interest of the child will be looked into. So we will look at the parents. Now, what was the cause of the divorce? If you had, let's say if you had a husband who was very violent at home and it's been documented, he's an alcoholic or things like that, or you have a spouse who is, the morals are just down poor, not good, things like that, which is not a example to the children that she is bringing up or the husband is bringing up. So the court look into all those things to see where the child will be placed. Is this child safe to be placed with the father or the mother? Will they be joint custody or they will not be joint custody? So will the child at some point go spend a weekend with the father and the next weekend with the mother, or would the child be an exclusive control and living control under the woman only or under the man? It will just depend. Because if you have a spouse who is a drug addict or a husband who is a drug addict or an alcoholic, it is not safe because you look at the best interest of the child. It is the standard. You cannot leave that child in the presence of such a person because guess what? That child will be subjected to abuse because that's not what you went into a relationship to get a child and subject that child to abuse.
You had joint property. You had a house. Who lives the house and who lives in the house?
Again, the judge will look at it. They will look at again if they decide that the woman stays in the house, she stays with again, as I told you, they will look at the cause of the divorce. What happened? What was the reason why these people divorced? Now, if the woman has to stay with the child, of course, they will always give this child or the children to the woman most of the time, because just that motherly instinct. They are more caring. And I'm not throwing the men somewhere that they're not caring, but again, it's easier to see that the woman would be more, I don't know how to
I get the point. I get the point. The reason I ask this is because it leads us to child support, which in some cases can trigger a whole war, between the husband and the wife in separation. Who pays child support? Usually, the understanding or the perception in the United States is that the law is sort of biased towards men. Men have to be those to pay child support to the woman. How are these things determined in court?
Again, they look at the best interest of the child. They look at the financial standing of both parties. They see who is at fault. For example, let me just deviate from this a little bit. Let's say you are married to your wife, and you both write a will. You will, part of your estate is going to the wife, and part of your estate is going to the children. And you end up killing your husband, or the husband ends up killing the wife. Under the law, because you killed your spouse, you are presumed dead. So whatever you were going to inherit from that will, it is gone. It will dwindle down to the children if there are children in that relationship. So they always look at who is at fault. If you're at fault in that relationship, you would pay the spousal support, or you pay the child support. So if the man is at fault, definitely the man would be, he would pay the child support. If the woman is at fault, which really it's again, they look at the financial circumstances of the parties and see where the children would be and how their living standards would still be maintained, in spite of the fact that they only having one parent at the moment. So they look into all those and see that, okay, if the husband was making more money or has a lot of wealth, they will look at the standard of living as of that moment and structure it in such a way that, the amount of money that he pays for child support, comes in every month. And if there is any change of circumstance, let's say the guy loses his job, he has to report to the social services that I've lost my job, I can no longer pay child support. Or if I was making $100,000, now I am now making $25,000. Bring it down to, make it proportional to what I'm making. But you cannot deliberately go look for a less paying job just because you want to punish your wife or your child. You cannot do that.
What is alimony in this case?
Now, alimony is it's money you pay to your spouse if you guys are divorced.
Why should that be so? You've divorced. Why should you pay your spouse money? And who determines who pays what to who?
No, again, you pay alimony because you have to. She has to subsist. just like there is child support.
But the woman is working. If the woman is working, why should you have to pay alimony to her?
Well, again, alimony is the fact that she is working doesn't necessarily mean that you should pay her alimony. You have to, because she is working she's taking care of your child also. So you have to give her some spousal support for that. You have to pay her some money in order to take care of the child.
Would you pay alimony and child support at the same time?
Yes, that is correct. Alimony is for the woman. Child support is for the child. You have to pay those.
Unfair. Are there times that the man would pay, the woman would pay alimony to the man?
Well, yes, that's true, because if it's reversed, yeah, you should pay. You pay the husband too. You pay. It is not only one side. The thing is, we see all this stuff from the perspective of the man. But if you reverse the cards, the woman too can pay the husband alimony. You can pay them that money also. Until there is a significant change of circumstances. Let's say the woman or the man who was receiving alimony from the former spouse. If there is death or there is remarriage, it's gone. You no longer pay again, because now the spouse is no longer there, or if she is remarried or he is remarried, then you stop paying alimony, but your child support still has to come through until the child reaches maturity, which most of the time is 21.
This is You and the Law at Chat Night Africa. And my guest today is Attorney Aneneba Akufo. Let's move a little bit away from the conjugal home to situations when you have a new job. Lawyer Akufo, when you have a new job, typically employers make you to sign documents with clauses like, well, at any time you can be terminated. In other words, with or without cause. Can this stand up in a court of law? Your employer just throws you out because you signed that document?
Well, yes, because there is a right to work state that most states are right to work. So you cannot just look at it from the perspective of the employer firing you. You can just wake up tomorrow and call your employer also and tell your employer that I'm not coming to work tomorrow. And that's it. He will not take you to court, because that's just the right. You have a right to do it. So because you have the right to do it, the employer can also, without cause, just you walk into your cubicle one day and you sit there and your boss summons you to the office and say, okay, Mr. John, we no longer need you today. Today's your last day. Just give me your badge and we'll walk you to the door. And that's it. You don't have no recourse, because most laws are written in, a right of work. So if the boss says that, you have to leave. Just as you can go home, you get up on your wrong side, you just don't like that job again. You pick up the phone and you dial your boss and say, Mr. Divine, I can no longer continue with this job again. Today is my last day. I'm not coming again. And that's it. They will calculate your pay and pay you for what you've worked for that week, and that's it. So it is not like if you're bound, you're stuck. There is something you can seek redress in the courts. Of course, there are situations in which if it is specifically written, if you have a terminal contract, a contract where you are hired for a specific thing, and it is written that you cannot be fired until this job is done, then that's different. But you rarely see those. But if you're just talking of general employment, yes, it's a right to work, and they can always fire you when they want.
What if an employer hid behind this clause, and perhaps because he asked you, the woman, to take you to bed and you refused, and he looks for a way to fire you? I mean, how would you say that it's not illegal?
No, again, no, that's not the question. That was not the question. Now, if you're saying that, somebody has been harassed, and based on that harassment, the boss is, trying to, stifle their progress by not promoting them, or even moving them to another department where they may not progress, or even firing them, if you can bring that proof, because you have to bring the evidence. The probative value of the evidence must outweigh any danger of unfair prejudice. So if you bring such evidence and say, okay, he summoned me to his office and, locked, pressed a button and the door got locked, and he stripped down and, he was showing me his genitals.
Jennifer. Mhm.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah, I mean, that's something that if you can prove that, if you can bring it up, if that's the reason why that person fired you because you don't want to have an intimate relationship with them, okay, then you can seek recourse in the law. He cannot fire you. That's not a right to work. That's different. That's sexual harassment, and you can seek redress, before a law court, and you would get justice because of that.
Chat Night Africa, you and the law. Lawyer Aneneba Akufo, Barack Obama once worked for his wife, Michelle. Then Michelle was the boss, and then eventually they got married. What I'm simply saying is sometimes you fall in love with a colleague and it results in marriage. What would it not be sexual harassment at workplace?
I mean, sexual harassment is sexual harassment. Again, it's just
what
not.
goes
It's just
beyond seeking love from a fellow worker, a co-worker? What goes beyond it?
Oh, okay.
The reason
I
I
see
ask
why.
this question,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
the reason I ask this question, sir, is because wherever, virtually around the world, even in Africa, everybody talks about no to sexual harassment at work. Everybody talks about it. But we know of a lot of situations when women are harassed at workplaces, abused. They would not go to bed with the boss. That's why I'm asking, where do you draw the line between harassment and just genuinely seeking love from a colleague?
Well, it's an objective test at that moment because, you know, what somebody might call flirting might be different from what somebody is called harassment. You know, and it will depend on the relationship between the man and the woman too. Because if we are buddies, we know we've done things, we go out together, we socialize together. There's certain things that the woman would tolerate. There's certain things that the man would tolerate from the woman. But if you're a third party, you're not really used to that person. You know, they would not take it. They would consider that as a harassment. Let's say, you can just place your hand on your co-worker's shoulder, and you might mistakenly go through their breast and tap their behind and things like that. To her, that's okay. It's normal because you guys jokingly do it. That's not harassment the way she sees it. But if a third party does the same thing to her, she would consider that as a harassment. And of course it is, because it's off limit. You cannot just put your hand on somebody the way just as you feel. So that would be harassment.
Let me make sure that everybody understands this. If you tell a female colleague, oh, you look so beautiful, would that be harassment?
I don't think so. It just depends the context under which you're doing that. The context. So if I'm complimenting somebody, I don't think that's would amount to harassment.
Is it harassment when the person doesn't want it?
No, again, I don't really see that as whether the person wants it or not. So let's say you see a woman, or a woman sees a man, and you see the lips are beautiful, the breasts are gorgeous. You say, "Oh, wow." You make those type of side comments that might feel as if the person feels somehow belittled or intimidated by what you said. That might amount to harassment. But if it is just casual stuff, or if it is persistent, because if it's a one-time thing, you will not consider that to arise to the level of harassment, because you say, okay, no, please don't, it's off limit, don't say that. Okay, you're done. But if you continuously do it, that would amount to harassment, because I've told you I don't like that joke.
If a boss is harassing a subordinate, who is liable? Is it the company where they work or the person harassing the woman?
Well, it just again, the boss is an agent to that company. The company is the principal of that of the boss. So if you create a very hostile work environment in which your people are harassing other people, oh yes, you can sue that person and sue the principal also, because they are liable for a tort or for an act that the company is liable for. I mean, they've committed an act that the company would be liable for. You can hold them responsible and also hold the principal responsible for the tort or for the act that the agent has committed. Because if you're working for a corporation or an organization, you are indirectly an agent for that particular corporation. So you can sue the parent company itself.
You are such a good friend of Divine, and I'm hoping to one day visit you where you are. If I visited you and we went to a Walmart or one of the grocery stores and we got into a fight, and I got you into a fight, or somebody caught me in a fight, how do I proceed with suing that person? Is it from my state in Maryland or where you are?
So to bring a lawsuit against somebody, there are three things that need to be present. You need personal jurisdiction, you need subject matter jurisdiction, and of course the venue for that case to be tried. The venue, which is the judicial district where the case will be tried. So personal jurisdiction, you move from Maryland, let's say you visit Georgia and you are here in Georgia and you get involved in a car accident or things like that. Let's say you're in the wrong. Where do you sue? I mean, if I bring a case against you, of course, I would not move from Georgia to Maryland to come sue you because you're not resident in Maryland. Your domicile is in Maryland and I am here in Georgia. So where is the suit to be brought? So number one, the standing. I have standing because you've injured me. So that's the first thing. I have standing because you've injured me. I am the plaintiff, you are the defendant. So I go to a law court. But Mr. Divine lives in Maryland. I'm here in Georgia. So where do I bring that court? Where do I bring the case? The course of action took place here in Georgia, in the streets of Georgia. You were using the highways of Georgia. So you are amenable to the laws of Georgia at that moment. But because you're not a resident of Georgia, what would happen is I will bring that case in a federal district court. And, because we are two citizens. Citizens here does not necessarily mean you're from United States. I'm from Canada. You're a citizen of Maryland. I'm a citizen of Georgia. So we are on two sides of the V. The V means I am against you. So I am a citizen of Georgia. You're a citizen of Maryland. I cannot bring a case against you in a court here, in a state court here in Georgia, because you're not resident here. So what most people do is you bring the case in a state court, and they will move the case up to the federal court, where it will be heard, because the federal court would apply federal law on that particular case, because you are citizens of different states, but they would apply state substantive law in that particular situation, but in federal courts.
If I come to Georgia where you are, sir, and took your car, say, Divine, get my car, go to a club or go to Crossroad, visit your friends, and I run into an accident, what's the implication of what's the legal implication or the liability I have in that accident? First, I'm not one of the authorized drivers of your car. Are there some legal implications there? Can I just come to Georgia and take your car and drive out?
If I give you permission to drive my car, let's say you're a family member or you're just a friend, if I give you permission to drive my car and you go get yourself into an accident, of course, the law would not hold me responsible for that, because you were the one who got yourself into an accident. So it is my car. You drove the car with my permission. So at that moment, let's say you go get yourself, let's not even say you got drunk and you got into an accident. That was personal liability on your side or responsibility on your part. So if you just get yourself into an accident, that's something that, if it's a family member, it is different. it's a family member, it's different. But if it is just a friend, an ordinary friend, no, it is your responsibility because you got yourself into an accident. Although it is my car, you might be covered by insurance. My insurance might cover you, but it is, you would face some liability also.
Typically, when friends visit from out of state or those within the state, they sometimes organize parties at home or in a public hall. If I came to your home, lawyer, and Neneba Kufo, and had some drinks, some liquor, and got the car out and killed somebody, who is responsible for that? Are there situations that the person who hosted the party, who organized the party, is responsible for the people, for the actions of those who attend the party and when they leave the party?
That's a very loaded question because it's just a lot you have to explain to try to answer that particular question because there is something called drum shop laws, which about 43 states in the United States have those laws, which basically protect people who serve alcohol, or who sell alcohol, or who retail alcohol. That they will not be held responsible if somebody buys alcohol from them and goes and gets themselves drunk and gets themselves into an accident. They would not be held liable. The liability on the person would come into the act. So those are steps with drum shop laws, and this is something that was originated in England back in the 1800s. Which there was strict liability if you serve somebody alcohol and that person caused an accident. There is strict liability for that. You are guilty. You must be held accountable. But if you look at the case where you just said somebody visit your house and you give them alcohol, you serve them alcohol, and they go cause an accident, there is something in tort law which is the duty of care. The duty of care. If that person gets out of your house, and or let's not even go about the duty of care. Well, let's put it that way. You have the duty, if you invite somebody, you are the host of a party, to make sure that people don't just drink excessively and visibly drunk and you still serve them more alcohol. If you do it that way, again, you look at the drum shop laws in your state to see what the level of liability on a host. So it would depend on the laws of that particular state. But again, if you serve somebody alcohol who is visibly drunk, you might also be liable if that person leaves your home and goes and causes an accident, because it is foreseeable that if you serve somebody too much alcohol, they would drive their car, and it is foreseeable that they would get into an accident. And if you get into an accident, then you would also there's approximate liability for what they've caused, because the actual cause of the accident, it is not you, it is them, because they drank alcohol from your house and they got themselves into an accident on the highways. But the proximate cause is also you, because you are the one who served them the alcohol while they were visibly drunk. So again, you look at your state, you look at the drum shop laws in your state. How do they treat people who serve alcohol? Because some of these laws, they just treat liability. If you serve alcohol to a minor, whether you were mistaken that this person is 18 or 17 or 25, it's an offense. You cannot come back and say, just like prostitution, you cannot take a child who is 18, 15, and you have relations with them, and you come back and say, no, I thought that child was 20. No, it's a strict liability crime offense, and you will be held liable. So always look at the drum shop laws in your state, or you consult a criminal attorney in your state to make sure that your state covers you or covers the person who is serving the alcohol to your guests.
Lawyer Aneneba Akufo. One of the things that a lot of immigrants do in the United States is either they rent an apartment, maybe a 3-bedroom apartment, or they have a townhouse or a single family home, and they rent part of the home to someone else. What are the legal implications of such an arrangement, sir? You take a 3-bedroom apartment and you sublease it to another person.
So it will always depend on the leasing agreement, because some leases because the lease is the contract between you and your landlord. That's the contract. That's the lease. Some will not allow you to sublease, but some do. They let you. You can actually sublease to a third party. So the only time that there will be an issue is you, the original tenant, you don't pay the rents because the landlord is, let's say you're paying $1,000 every month for your apartment and you have 3 bedrooms. Now you sublet one of them for $500 and you sublet the other bedroom for $500. All the landlord is seeing is you. He or she doesn't know that there are 2 other persons. But when you default on your rent and the landlord comes to realize that, oh, Mr. Divine Chamukong had sublet that apartment to a second party, to another person, okay, it will always depend. If your lease agreement, because this is where it differs, whether it's a sublease or, whether there's a privity of contract or there's a privity of estate between you and your landlord. So if you had a 6 months agreement, if this is a 1 year lease, take it that way, if there's a 1 year lease and there is 6 months remaining and you sublease all the 6 months, you to that person that, okay, for the rest of the 6 months, you will pay this rent, I'm out of the scene. So the entire 6 months, there is a privity of contract between you, the original tenant, and the landlord, and there's a privity of estate between that the landlord and the new tenant. So that person is responsible for all the rents, not you, the original tenant. But if there is a sublease, both of you are responsible. Let's say at the end of the month, you cannot pay the $1,000. This guy will go after the other guy to pay because there is privity of contract and there is privity of estate between the landlord and the tenant and the landlord and tenant number 2. So it just depends on the agreement.
The last question perhaps on the show today has to do with also liability. You buy a lawnmower to cut grass out of your home. You're cutting the grass, you're running the engine, cutting the grass, and maybe the blade cuts off, flies towards your leg and cuts your leg. Can you hold the manufacturer of that machine responsible for that accident?
Yes, there is, when you manufacture a good, there are certain warranties that go with it. There is warranty of merchantability, there is warranty fitness for a particular purpose. So when you manufacture that lawnmower, it was fit to chop off the grass on your lawn. So if you take that lawnmower and in the course of you mowing your lawn and one of the blades is hits a rock and it's not steady enough the way it was designed from the factory, and it breaks off and slices your leg and cuts a vein and you bleed to death, or you just bleed, you're seriously injured. Yes, the manufacturer, if it's defective from the factory, the manufacturer is responsible.
You can also take the situation of your car and the airbags in your car. You're driving, you run into an accident, and the airbag comes off and kills you instead of protecting you. Would you sue the manufacturer of the airbag or the car?
Of course, the manufacturer of the car will place the airbag there. Again, it might go into different levels of liability. You might go after the person who designed the airbag, or the manufacturer who assembled it and put it in there in that particular car. But yes, you can go to the person who designed the airbag. Maybe from design it was a defective design, or the person who installed it in the car with the manufacturer, maybe he installed it wrongly. So it's different levels of the way you weave through the process to see who can be held liable. Yes, but you can effectively go after the manufacturer. You can effectively go after the person who assembled that particular product. And if that's the cause of action, if the reason why you were injured is because of that manufacturing defect, oh yes, you can go after them and seek redress.
Ignorance of the law is not an excuse. That's why We come on Chat Night Africa to weaponize you just so that if ever you found yourself on the wrong side of the law, you don't go to court and tell the judge, sorry, judge, I never went to a law school, so I didn't know I was committing the law. Unfortunately, you would be led away in handcuffs. That's why we come to do this service at Chat Night Africa in the same way as we come here with medical doctors specialized in different fields to talk about cancer, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, and you name it. You can still ask your questions, post the questions. If you're not calling on the show, post the questions. And I can assure you, this very busy learned lawyer, though as busy as he is, will find time to respond to you. So, two last questions. How can you be contacted? People told me the last time you came here and said, Divine, we've listened to lawyers. This is one of a kind. If they wanted to contact you, sir, how can they contact you? Well, first answer is they can talk to Divine. But if they wanted to reach you out directly in the areas where you have discussed, how can they talk to you, sir?
So there are two ways to contact me. If you go, I do have a website. It is, www. So it's www.innocentlaw.com, which is the word innocent, which is INNOCENT law.com. So www.innocentlaw.com. You go there is a contact page. You can always send me a contact. Tell me what you want, and or tell me what your issue is. Then I would definitely respond. And even if I have to look for assistance somewhere else to try to assist you, we will. Then if you cannot, you can always email us. It is info, so that is INFO at innocentlaw.com. Or you can also there is a phone number. It is the phone number is 678-675-0395. And of course, you can always contact Mr. Divine Chamoko. He knows how to get me, and he's good at getting me. So we'll always be there for you guys. Okay?
And we'll take your last word now, sir.
Again, it's always fascinating coming on this on your platform, Mr. Divine Chamoko, and thanks for all the good things you do to the community. And again, as you said it, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Just don't do things because you feel that you do not know. It's not legal. It is, I don't know if it is right or wrong. No, ask for somebody. And the one thing I always like for you non-immigrants, or even if you're here with a green card, or if you're in the process of getting a green card, or even if you're a U.S. citizen who is naturalized, please, if you ever find yourself in state court, let's say for domestic violence, or for a DUI, or for a battery, or for shoplifting, or for whatever reason you find yourself before a state court, not a federal court, not an immigration court, within the court system, like your superior court, your magistrate court, and they want you to take a plea deal, please make sure that you contact a lawyer before you take that plea deal, because the severity of the plea deal itself might be more difficult, might be more egregious than you even serving a jail sentence. Because if you have a green card, for example, and you commit domestic violence, you go before the state court, and because you don't want to spend time in detention, you don't want to spend time in jail, you say, okay, the judge says, just take 9 months, or just take 1 year probation, and that's it. Then if you don't commit any offense again within that time period, then it will fall off. That is correct. It is absolutely true. But the thing is, the consequences is what's more egregious there, because after 1 year, once you are convicted, because probation under immigration, because that's under state law, criminal law, but under immigration law, a probation is a conviction. Once you've taken that 1 year probation, that's a 1 year conviction under immigration law, and they would come after you and take you into immigration custody because you found yourself in that situation, because you've been convicted. It's a felony. It's 1 year and above. The sentencing is 1 year and above. You've been convicted of an offense, and the because it is not just the offense itself that really matters. It is the sentencing, which is 1 year. It becomes a felony under most states' laws. And if you find yourself in that situation, please always consult an immigration attorney to advise you what to take when it comes to a plea deal, because the consequences might be more severe than even you going to jail for about 6 months or 5 months. So in situations like that, you don't want to get a plea deal for something under a year. But again, speak with somebody who can guide you. Don't do it blindly. And with that, again, you have all my information. Anytime, reach out to me. We should be able to assist you in whatever capacity. Thank you so much, Mr. Divine.
Why do so many couples struggle with resolving conflicts? Well, the dynamite from Ghana, Ruth Yeboah, is coming. You don't want to miss this jaunty discussion. If you imagine Irish potatoes straight out of a boiling pot into your palms, that's how hot chat night is going to be when Ruth Yeboah comes to answer the question, why do so many couples struggle with resolving conflicts? I want to thank you, sir, for being one of the pillar supporters of Chat Night Africa. We are where we are because of some of the support that comes from your office. First, you are here to discuss this topic. We really, really appreciate you, sir. And I want to extend my regards to your very loving wife. I hope she's watching this broadcast. I could see her typing information that shows how serene your home is. Thank you, sir. And I know you have a nice dog also.
Chubby. My dog's name is Chubby.
A fat bone this evening.
It's a Maltese.
Thank you, sir. Lawyer Aneneba Akufo. And that's where we wrap up on the show. This is Chat Night Africa Live. Chat Night Africa Live from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Broadcast Transmission Director Mumba Lingua. Production Advisors Professor Ben Bonga and Dr. B. Dr. B. Tadzong Formula. This is Chat Night. The power of Chat Night.
Attention.
Studio manager Beatrice Famune. Chat Night from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Chat Night Africa. Production assistants John Tanto Emarengwai and Emarengwai and Uncle Lord Benson. My social media platforms manager and video editor Sir Roger Fool in London. Chat Night, the power of Chat Night. Special assistant to the presenter of Chat Night Africa, Daniel Eno. Ladies and gentlemen, merci à tout le monde. Chat Night Africa is compiled and presented by Divine and Chamukong. You don't want to miss the show coming up with Mrs. Ruth Yeboah from Ghana. This woman is a lightning storm. Why do couples struggle with resolving conflicts? This will be hot. Sasera Prefresh Show. Merci à tout le monde. Thank you so much for watching this day's broadcast. I'll meet you again soon and very soon on this platform. Thank you. Bye-bye.
We'll put a